And welcome to another edition of the Best of Three podcast. I'm Alvin, that's Patrick, and today we are joined by Matt Futterman. Matt is the coming to us from the Athletic, but also the author of the soon to be released, or I guess whenever you hear this, it might be out by now. Book called The Cruelest Game, comes out on August 4th, available for pre-order now, and then you can buy it for real if you're hearing this after August 4th. But first and foremost, Matt, welcome. And how
Thanks
you doing?
so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. We ran into each other in DC a couple days ago, and I saw you. I think I may have startled you a little bit, but when I saw you, I knew it was a good chance to talk about your book, and I appreciate you coming on. So I'm gonna I read the book. Myself and Patrick have both read the book, and I could wax on about it, but I'd like to hear your synopsis about the book. Why now? I'm even curious about why the title, The Cruelest Game.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me. I guess I should grab a copy of the book and show the book.
Yeah, show the book. I don't have a physical copy. We have the digital copy. So.
I'll get you one. Got one right here near. Okay, so there it is.
Boom. There it is.
The Cruelest Game.
Yeah.
Boom.
There you go.
How about that? See it right there. 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears. So, anyway, so what's this book about? This book is about what the subtitle says it is, which is chasing greatness in professional tennis. I really wanted to take readers inside the world of the Pro Tour and show them what these people go through in order to be great at their sport, which so many of them are. That being said, I sort of noticed this dynamic over the last few years of traveling a lot around the world with these people. And there seemed to be this dynamic where you had this one group of players that was kind of exiting the stage, the great ones, Murray, Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, Serena, and they seem to possess this kind of secret code of of how to thrive, how to survive in this sport for so many years over the long term. And there was this new generation that was filled with great players, but also with players who were sort of struggling to get the handle on those codes. And they, as great as they were, Alcaraz, Sinner, Swiatek, Coco, they all had their moments of, oh my God, freaking out to some extent, and just basic wonder as to how these great players who had dominated the sport for the last 20 years has been able to be so good for so long. And I wanted to sort of capture that dynamic of this generational moment. I wanted to get inside the minds of critical players at what I think is a really critical moment in this sport as it goes into its next phase, with by now they're fast becoming very much household names, and they do things on the tennis court that I think even have left the great ones of the past in wonder. But the question is can they hold up physically? Can they hold up mentally? And what does it take to do that over the course of 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna my first question and kind of the first thing that it's a little bit macro, and then we'll go micro after this. But after writing a book like this, what surprised you when you finally finished it? And obviously, there's things happening in the book that are by the time you finish writing it, other things have happened. So what was the big surprise for you at the end of the book?
That I finally got it done. No, I mean, first of all, that I finally got it out. Second of all, I like to think myself as pretty humble, but I will always forever be surprised, flattered, and amazed when, people like you read the book and say, yeah, this was, that was great. I really, I really enjoyed that. I learned stuff from it. I mean, that is just it's a very humbling experience for me. So in a sense, that sense of surprise will always be there. And I guess, in terms of the reporting of the book, what surprised me to some extent is I always knew that these people that I'm writing about are very young, they're very impressionable, and at the same time, you know intellectually that they're not fully formed human beings. I don't know when we become fully formed human beings, but these are mostly people in their 20s. Some of them are in their 30s, some of them are teenagers. But there's these moments that over and over keep happening when you realize like just how young they really are. And
For example,
I mean, look, Carlos Alcaraz freezing up in a full-on panic attack at the 2023 French Open when he's playing Djokovic in this, he had sort of like he had sort of come at this sport with this like sense of wonder, and there seemed to be nothing that could budge him off that sort of nirvana state almost. And yet there he is at Roland Garros, and all of a sudden he's kind of having a freak out, and he can't move his body. And he's fully fit, physically,
yeah.
But he's cramping up from the tension of this, of the tension of this moment of facing Djokovic in a Grand Slam and knowing how hard this task is going to be and doing it was he the favorite? I don't know. I think a lot of people picked him going into that match, and that on that day was too much for him. So you see something like that. You see this moment last year at the U.S. Open with Coco. She's 2 months removed from winning the French Open. You think she has this sort of sport in a stranglehold at this point. And really what's happening is she can't serve all of a sudden. We've all seen, baseball players who suddenly, they can't make the throw from second base, and catchers who can't make the throw back to the pitcher. I mean, that's basically what Coco Gauff was going through at that point. And, she's Coco Gauff. She's like as cool a customer as there is out there. And then yet in a flash, she transforms back to being, I think, was she 22 last year, 21, 22, but
something like
that early 20 something who's trying to figure out her life, and trying to figure out her job and going through a rough spot with it. So there's all these moments, and what it comes down to is, when you get into a situation like, having dinner with Djokovic and you ask him, like, what's going on inside your head in one of these super intense matches. And he just flat out says like, oh, it's a roller coaster. You doubt yourself. You can't believe, you can't see how this is going to work out. And that's Novak Djokovic. He's won 24 Grand Slam titles. So I think we see them on television and in stadiums doing these superhuman things and acting like these sort of just the essence of calm under pressure so often. And yet all of a sudden you get struck by the human frailties, and then you get them to talk about those human frailties and what goes into it and why they're experiencing it. And that's where the surprise really begins to happen.
Gotcha. And that's one of the things that I love about our sport, and that, I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll let you go in a minute here, but like, one of the things I love about our sport is that it is so human, right? There's very little distance between the players and the fans. You can see all the emotion kind of all the time if you're looking for the right things. And, as I was going through this book, a lot of the notes that I was taking was like, you can get to a place that Novak has gotten to in time. And the point you make about age, which I think you end up tying it together towards the back end of the book. It's like, yeah, these are sometimes 17, 18, maybe 24, 25-year-olds. And they say we don't, become fully formed adults until 30 or something like that. It's like, and that's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Go ahead, Pat.
When I read the book, I loved how you got into the frailty of it and everything. I've been reading you, Matt, for about 25 years. And I didn't realize that until we were going to have this interview, and I thought, my God, what is that first time I read Futterman? And I went back all the way to 2000, and there was an article that you wrote for the Star Ledger about Serena and Venus. I don't know if you remember that time, but it was about how they were changing the game, and you were saying that like the Williams era has begun, and I really have been following you since that point from 2000 to now, and I was just going to ask you. This is kind of a huge macro question. My apologies, but how have you how have you seen the game change from that human frailty standpoint that you do so well in the book? How has it changed from that moment when you saw Serena and Venus in 2000 to today, where you're still seeing that human frailty, but I'm guessing in different ways?
Well, thank you so much for like reading me all the way back from 25 years ago. I mean, my mother has done that. My father has done that. I'm not sure anybody else has done that. So yeah, that goes way back. But yeah, I remember that story. I remember the start of I remember sort of being just personally kind of blown away, by the start of the Williams era, because here were these two girls from Compton, and they had just sort of that "Are you ready?" world for us, because you better be, aura about them, and it was great, and they just completely shook up the tennis in a way that no one, I would say, has before or since. In terms of the human frailty aspect of it, I think you've had a monumental shift in the fact that back then you really weren't supposed to talk about it, and it was seen as a weakness. You were supposed to shut it out. You're supposed to ignore it. The image I always go to for sports psychology back then is, remember Tiger Woods when he used to, when he first came on the tour, and he would line up a putt, and he would put his hands over the brim of his baseball cap, and he would really try and focus. And that was kind of a physical manifestation of this idea of focus, shut everything out. And I think 25 years later, where we've come to, and what you hear from most of these mindset specialists who work with players, and I mean, just about every player I talk to these days has someone they speak to, has a sports psychologist, or just a psychologist, therapist, life coach, any, whatever the term is, has one of those people. And I think what goes on now is not so much to try and shut that other stuff out, but to verbalize it, to bring it in, to get comfortable with it. There's a great mindset guru, Mike Gervais, who has worked with the Seattle Seahawks and any number of other people. And, Mike would say, it's not about, if you're afraid of the tiger, what we need to learn to do is to invite the tiger to sit on the couch with us and learn how to pet the tiger. And so it's all of these players trying to figure out what their tiger is and what they're scared of, and what they are, what the thoughts are that are inevitably going to go through their heads at 4-4 30 all when they have to hit a decent serve. And because that sort of stuff is inevitable, there's an acceptance that you can't shut it out. So what you need to do now is you need to learn how to deal with it. And so if what is going to flash through your mind at 4-4 30 all when you're trying to serve is your mother or your father yelling at you when you were 8 years old and saying you better make this shot or else, you better learn how to deal with that emotions and understand it in a way that it won't cause you to self-destruct. I think that's the biggest change that I've seen, and thank God, I would say, that it has changed in that way. And this effort also to try to get people to separate their results from their identity. I think those two things go hand in hand because that's that's the rabbit hole that every tennis player at some point in his or her career falls into. Because it's such a brutal sport in that way. You asked earlier, why is it the cruelest game? It's because everybody loses every week for the most part, except for one person. And so if you are defining yourself by what your result is at the end of the week and by your identity, you're screwed. You're going to end up as Madison Keys and 29 years old and having had a great career and having earned millions of dollars, but also feeling inadequate and not enough until you get the right coach who happens to be your boyfriend and then your fiance and now your husband, who tells you, I don't really care if you win or lose. Like, you lose, great. We get on a plane, we go home, we're drinking coffee in our house in Orlando in 30 hours. But go down swinging, go down the right way. I give you permission to lose. It's fine. And no one had ever given her that permission before, and it made all the difference to her.
Yeah, that's a really, I remember that point in the book, and I was thinking, like, it takes very much so a fully formed adult to even take that kind of information and go, yeah, that's actually exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be fine. There will be another tournament. There will be another match. And I think there's a big shift, especially when we're talking about players coming onto the tour at age 17 or Madison a little bit younger, 16, where you go from junior tennis where you must excel to get to the next level, to get to professional tennis. And then when you get to professional tennis, there is excelling, but there's also just being a professional tennis player. You can, getting the job is different than doing the job of being a professional tennis player, which comes with a lot of losing. Like these pros that we see on television, they were all, for the most of them, all top 5, top 10 in the world as juniors. They did a lot of winning. And then they get onto the pro tour, and being a professional tennis player is mostly about losing. Just try not to lose too often so that you can continue doing this as a job. And I think that kind of quote from Madison is like, yeah, that sums it up. When you're close to 30 years old, I get it. I get it all the way around. I'm curious, after you mentioned Madison, there were a lot of players that you told the story of, the codes, if you will, through their kind of journey as professional tennis players. The selection was interesting. Why did you choose those players and maybe not others?
The selection was maybe one of the most difficult things to go through in the book, because I was working on this book for a couple of years, and it's a moving target. Things are always changing every few months, sometimes every few weeks. I really wanted to make sure I had the critical players. I didn't want to write. I mean, I think there's a great book to be written. There was a great movie that was done about, the Challenger Tour, but that wasn't what I wanted this book to be. I mean, people care about stars. I care about stars. Stars drive this sport. So to me, I had to write about the biggest and the most important players who were on the court at this point. And when you start framing it in that sense, it becomes a much more narrow window. Are there players that right now sitting here I might have wanted to spend a little more time on? Yeah, I mean, Alexander Zverev happened to have won his first Grand Slam a month before, the book came out, just as I was finishing it. Didn't have time to do a whole deep dive on him. And he's a fairly critical player. But at the same time, I do think, he is someone who, I mean, look, he may yet win multiple Grand Slams, but he's not going to be piling them up. And I think so it was a matter of focusing on players that you were just seeing all the time and hearing about all the time. Players who were really good, players who were charismatic and were dominating the conversation. Casper, and then also, look, part of this is sometimes you just get great material from a player who's, you know, maybe not, a top 5 player, at least at the moment this book comes out. Casper Ruud comes to mind, but, being able to really sort of get inside the relationship between him and his father was a real opportunity, and it fit in well to something I really wanted to explore, which was this sport is different in terms of the moms and the dads staying involved in a very real and a very close way throughout a lot of the careers. Aaron Judge is playing right field for the New York Yankees. His parents are not sitting in the stands telling him to move in or move out. They're not, he goes up to bat. They're not telling him to swing or not swing, no one is telling Clayton Kershaw like whether to throw a curveball or fastball. That just doesn't happen for the most part in other sports, and it's all the time in tennis. The really good parent coaches fire themselves is what I would argue. Although Christian Ruud is probably the exception here. Maybe more than anyone else. But Coco's father, his goal was to fire himself, which he did. And so that's really important. So I wanted to get inside these families. So I'm constantly thinking as I'm writing the book about big themes that I want to write about and characters who are going to address those themes. So, the main characters in the book, Novak had to be the star of the book, right? It was
Right.
no question. And that becomes obvious. That becomes obvious the first Grand Slam you go to, because he is the main character in the sport. Everyone is kind of obsessed with him. Sinner is it has adopted his game. Alcaraz is looking at how he practices. Coco is looking at how he returns serve. One after another, everybody has their eyes on him because he's the magician. He's the GOAT. So he was always going to be a main character. I did want to write a chunk about the American men, because I think that's a really important theme, especially in the country I come from, and also, but also in the sport. This country dominated men's tennis for several decades. Most of the first 3 decades of the modern era, starting in 1968. Yes, Australians were great. There were other players who were terrific, but the Americans were always there. And the American men just haven't won slams in 20 years, and everyone's desperate for one to come along. And, there was this generation of players who were sort of raised to fill that bill, in Taylor Fritz, Francis Tiafoe, Tommy Paul, and Riley Opelka before he got hurt, because they were all playing in junior Grand Slam finals. So I wanted to write about that. And so as things went along, it sort of made itself obvious. Obviously, Alcaraz was going to have to be a main character, and Sinner was going to have to be a main character. And also, what has women's tennis been about the last few years? A lot of it's been about Swiatek and Sabalenka. And, I needed to find a way to sort of penetrate their teams and get, to speaking with them and have as much contact with them as possible and understand the dynamics of what was really going on with them. So I want to say it was really hard to figure out who the main characters needed to be. At the same time, it kind of it makes itself obvious. And I think I placed some pretty good bets.
Well, what I also love about it, you do get into some of the supporting characters, we could call them. Like, I love how you call Medvedev a pterodactyl. I had never heard that before, but and like a human backboard. I love the descriptions you have of the players. That suits Medvedev, I feel, so well. I think Alvin and I, we both have an affinity for Medvedev a bit. But also, you also bring up other people I've been thinking about as well for especially this year, Howard Friendrick. You brought up the AP writer in your acknowledgments, and he just did that story about Jensen Brooksby with autism. And you talked about the long nights that writers spend at Grand Slams. And I was wondering if you could kind of push back the curtain for us fans a bit and kind of get us into that late night, because I think people often forget that a 5-hour match ends and we go to sleep, but for you, your job is just starting, right? And I'm wondering about when you go into the press box and you're having to ask these questions to these athletes after a 5-hour match. What is it about that you're going through? Like, can you put us in that environment just of what's happening between the journalists and the athletes? Sorry if this is a bit random, but
I can tell you we're all really tired. We've all had a really long night, and we're all probably looking forward to being horizontal before too long. So, there's that element to it. I think there's like a battlefield aura about these people after they've been through something like that. You're in quite close quarters with them often. So you can really see detail. You can easily tell if they've been crying or not. And there are different players who handle it differently. I mean, Novak, if he loses a match, he is in a press room within about 5 minutes. He's just like wants to get out of there, but he's there for it. Like, we'll talk about it. It's not giving one-word answers and running out the door. So it's different for different players. I think pretty much all of them, they go in, they have to take the court believing that they can win the match. I mean, as Alvin referenced before, these are people that have won so many matches in their lifetime, and they are, they're used to being the best for miles around, and no one can touch them. And then they go into, the highest realm of competition here, and they're not automatically the best anymore. And they get beat. And, we were talking about the human frailty aspect of it. The sort of father of all that in tennis is Alan Fox, who I spoke with for this book and was very helpful. And he said something that, will always stay with me. And, I was thinking about it the other day when I lost a singles match 6-2, 6-2, that, here I am 56 years old and I've been playing, for a really long time. And it really shouldn't matter, how I really shouldn't feel bad about, any loss at this point, because what does it matter? But there is something about tennis, and this goes back to the title of the book, The Cruelest Game, that when you lose at tennis, it kind of feels like you just got beat up. And 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 that's Alan's line. That's what he says. Like, you can go down to the park and you can play 3-on-3 basketball, and you can lose, and you could lose badly, but everyone's still sort of like swatting hands and having a good time and playing in the park and stuff like that. He said, like, you go onto a tennis court and, you get drilled like that. You feel like somebody, knocked you in the teeth. And he said his argument is that it's not so much because of, anyone has actually punched you, because things have gone really bad if they actually have. But it's because it just sort of feels, it's that loneliness out there. And there's like a sense of shame if somebody is having their way with you on a tennis court. And, I think I never want to compare, my experience of the game to a professional athlete's experience of the game, what I do on a tennis court and what all of us do, is completely different from the stuff they are able to do with a ball and with their bodies. But, I go back to, something a marathoner once said to me, because I do run a lot of marathons, and this was, an Olympic marathoner, and I made some reference to that. And he said, we all experience it. You and I, we experience the same pain. We just experience it at different moments. And I think that is something that even a professional tennis player would allow you to empathize with them and would probably welcome it. They would say, well, yeah, of course. I mean, but I'm doing it on center court at Wimbledon. It's a little different. And yes, it is different. It's obviously completely different. But, I've had people tell me about the sensations, and I tell them about their sensations of it. And they're kind of like, yeah, right. You double faulted when everything was on the line. You feel like a dunce and you feel completely exposed. You feel naked. So, that's something that, I kept coming back to in the book, and that question of why does tennis do this to people? Why does it reveal character and personality in a way that I don't think any other sport does, or few other sports do?
Yeah. That's tennis for you in a nutshell. We kind of circle back to the Novak of things, and I think pretty early on in the book, as I'm starting to get a feel for what is this book actually about, because I know there's been some talk about how the book might be about how tennis players are unhappy, but I was like, no, this book is about a lot more than that. And as you started going on and laying out kind of the thesis of the book, I'm like, this book could be all about Novak Djokovic. This feels like the Novak story. And I feel that way because I have this own personal view of professional tennis players, and that they get to their peak at some point, and it's very hard to sustain that peak for longer than 3 years. You see someone get to 4 in the world, and if they don't get past 4 in the world, that's kind of where they are, and then they return down, or let's just say players catch up to them, right? And I've always had a very difficult time kind of closing the loop on that thought. And I think your book very well helped me close that, in that one of the codes to being a professional tennis player is being able to go through 3-year cycles. It's not necessarily a peak. And I think Novak is the king of that. So if I give that back to you, in that this kind of happens in 3-year cycles, and a player has to, like you mentioned in the book, almost forcefully reinvent themselves all the time. Is that about what you were going for?
I mean, I didn't realize it when I was going. That was something that comes out in the reporting, and like you said, I think you're right. That is sort of a through line in the book that you see with a lot of the players who do excel, and especially the ones who have excelled in the past. Yes, they all changed. They all realized that they were going to have to keep getting better. And, it's so cliche. Every athlete says, I'm just, there's always things I can improve. I'm trying to get better every day. They all say that. But in terms of really changing, and part of it is just the simple acceptance on the men's side, at least, that as you grow older, you can't play these long points anymore. So you got to play fast, and you got to finish points, and you got to be way more aggressive. So if you talk about, as you said, the Novak of it all, yeah, he is so different than the player that started winning Grand Slams when he was and Nadal went through the same transition when they were playing so much attrition tennis and waiting for their spots. And they would, it was like death by 1,000 cuts with them in some ways. What did they get to when they were winning some of their later Grand Slams, which is just this first strike tennis. That for Novak never would have been possible had he not basically completely remade his serve after his elbow issue in the late 20-teens, which is an incredible sort of crazy thing in its own right. But he went from that serve being something of a weakness, and Nadal the same way, to it being a real weapon. I mean, his spot serving, even today, when it's on, is just about unmatchable. I mean, and he's not, hitting 151 on the radar gun like Ben Shelton is, but he doesn't have to, because he hits the spots so well and at such terrific moments. So yeah, there is that necessity to rev yourself up and rejuvenate yourself and get yourself ready to embark on another mission. Because yeah, like you said, players do catch up. The game changes. I would say like one of the starkest examples we've seen this, and one of the ones that, I personally am most excited about, is watching this version of Naomi Osaka.
Yeah.
Because it's so different. And she's trying to make it so different because she knows she has to, than the one that was so dominant in 2020, 2021, in that period when she was, outside of Ash Barty, the best player in the world. And just sort of different from Ash Barty too, because Ash was such a magician. But, Osaka goes away because, first she had some mental health struggles, then she had a baby, and then she was on maternity leave, and then she comes back, and the game has pretty much completely changed on her. There's no standing in the middle of the court, digging in and swinging, which is the game that she pretty much grew up training for. And now she's got to dig in and out of corners, and she's got to learn how to. I read about this in the book because I was at her sort of training period before, at the end, when she was just about to come back from maternity leave. And she was literally learning how to hit an open stance backhand, which had gone from becoming kind of a trick shot to something that you just have to be able to do if you're going to compete, because you need that extra split second to get out of the corner. And, if you're moving your front foot in front of your hip instead of keeping it on the other side and being able to push off the back foot and at the same time push yourself back towards the center of the court, you're going to, you're not going to be in position. And so I think that's something that, really does separate the greatest of the greats from players who get hot and are great and win some titles and then have their moment and sort of fade off.
It's almost like the job requirements have changed. Like she was there doing the job exceptionally well, doing the same job everyone else was doing, just better, and then she leaves, and now they are like, okay, it's effectively like we have AI now, and you need to be able to use that to do this job. And she's like, I don't even know how to turn a computer. What are you talking about? Something like that. I spent some time watching her when we were in DC last week on the practice course, and I was like, she is, I'm not saying a relic because she's not that old, but like she is a perfect example of tennis, I would say almost pre-2021. Like there's kind of a change there, especially like when Iga hit the scene. And then after, like the requirements, especially in the front court, to be able to manipulate the ball with your hands, it's become almost table stakes at this point. And you can see she's very good at doing the other things. And now the game is asking more and more of, specifically the women players. So that's, I was really glad to see, like after, seeing her in person and then reading the book, like, this is actually a very, very interesting way to tell this story. But kind of going back,
and give her credit, because she is leaning into it, and she is. I mean, if you saw her at Wimbledon, I never thought I would see Naomi Osaka playing at Wimbledon the way she played. And she was great. I mean, there was, I kind of thought there was a point in the middle of the tournament. I thought, like, wait a minute, is Naomi Osaka going to win Wimbledon? It really kind of, when she drilled Sabalenka in that match, you really had to think, like, wait a minute, is she the favorite? Like, is this going to happen? And yeah, she gets exposed, but like, I mean, just seeing the smile on her face and figuring out how to play grass better Same with Coco. Coco's, a lot younger, and it's great that she's also, it seems like, ready to embrace the next phase of her career. And Coco has a real understanding of it in the sense that, I once asked her about this idea of like, how much of you are you at this point? And I think she said something like 65% or so, because she thought, she was like, look at when women tennis players peak. She's like, Iga threw it all off. She's like, but I'm focused on like being around 24 years old in that period, like in my mid 20s. She's like, that's when you win. That's when people seem to win a lot of titles. And so I'm still evolving and I'm still getting there, which is such a healthy attitude. It's great.
It really is. I want to kind of go back to, the thing that everyone talks about, the Sinner and Alcaraz duopoly. I think the way that you kind of tied those two together in the back end of the book was like something I'm sure Gary Nathan would have been proud of. But I want to kind of get your view on that, their place in the game together, and then maybe even like if you have anything you could share about their view on their place in the game together.
Well, they know how important they are. And they know that they need each other. And I really do believe Sinner when he says the sport needs Alcaraz. And I think he kind of needs Alcaraz because he's his that's his measuring stick at the moment. Now, there are going to be other ones, you can't look at Rafael Hodar right now and not think, this guy's going to eventually be a problem for these people, if not very, very soon. So, there are going to be other ones. It happens. It's not going to be just these two splitting Grand Slams for the next 10 years. I really don't think that's it.
It's not going to happen. It can't happen.
Be. Guys you see why. Because people get hurt. People miss. People, it gets really hot and the Sinner can't finish a match. Stuff happens. So that's the sport, right? But I do, having said that, Alcaraz has set his sights, his goal is very, very clear. He wants to be the greatest of all time, and he wants to win a lot of Grand Slam titles. Will he be able to? I don't know. Tiger Woods had one number in his head from the time he picked up, from the time he started playing professional golf, which was Jack Nicklaus's record of 18 majors. But stuff happens, life happens. Life gets in the way. You get injured. You make bad decisions. It doesn't always work that way. But Alcaraz certainly knows that he can do things that no other player can do. Sinner knows that too. Sinner also knows that he's got to, I think, work a little harder at it, that he has a lot of natural gifts, more than all but one person on the planet right now, probably. But that, the really magical stuff doesn't quite come to him. And that maybe if they're both playing at their best, Alcaraz probably wins. But the thing about tennis is, it's so rare. It's never going to happen over a 5-set match that both players play at their best for all 5 sets. And it's rarely going to happen on any given Sunday that both players are playing at their best. So it becomes all about what can you do with what you have on that day. And, that's where Sinner is working. I think that's where Sinner's head is at. And Alcaraz's head seems to be with how dynamic can I make this? What can I accomplish today that will make things completely amazing? That will be completely amazing, and at the same time, not be an idiot. Not play just highlight reel tennis. Be efficient. Work on. Do the kind of grinding hard work like we saw him do last year, heading into the U.S. Open.
I think we've gotten there with him.
Yeah. Well, Matt, you brought up a really good analogy, I thought, in your book about how Ben Shelton is trying to get into these two. And you brought up, I can't remember it exactly, but how Ben started a little bit later in his tennis journey than Alcaraz. And so you brought up like, oh, that means that Alcaraz has hit 6 millions more tennis balls than Shelton in his life. And it reminded me a little bit of like that, maybe over popularized 10,000 hour theory with Malcolm Gladwell and all that. But I did think, when you look at a player like Ben Shelton trying to break into Alcaraz and Sinner, do you see a way through? Do you think that he might be able to, I guess, compete with them in a way that puts him in the mix? Or do you think he still has a couple more years to go?
I think he's got a ways to go. The numbers will say that. I mean, right now he's playing way too many 3-set matches or 5-set matches against players who are ranked well below where he is. And I keep waiting for him to get to the point where he's winning early round matches 2 and 3. Like that's, and he just doesn't do that. He plays way too many tiebreakers. Tiebreakers, even when you have his serve, are basically coin flips, especially later in a match when the pressure gets more intense and the level mostly probably goes down a little bit. So, I mean, and it doesn't matter what I think. I mean, I was just talking to his dad in Washington the other day, and like, he and Ben are both well aware that they've got a lot of work to do to get to that point where he's dominating matches. The big issue, I think, right now, and the numbers bear this out, is the return of serve.
Yeah.
He's just not getting enough. There are certain things he does well, but he's not breaking. He's not breaking enough. He's not getting enough break point chances. He's not converting those. I mean, you talk about like being clinical. I mean, he lost that match to Tabila the other night. Like that match should have been over an hour and 20 minutes before it was actually over, because he had him. It was 4-4 love 40 and Tabila was serving, and not only did he not win those 3 points, I think he didn't get 2 of the returns into the court. One of them was a second serve, and then he had 2 more break points. He did in that game, didn't convert those. Like I think we will know Ben Shelton is, or one signal we'll have that Ben Shelton is ready is that when he's playing a quarterfinal in DC and he's got those break points and he's up a set, he gets one of them and then serves out the set fairly in short order and is in the shower and back in his hotel room, getting rest, getting some food, and getting ready for the next day. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be really hard and the reason I wrote about him and the reason I thought he was so interesting was because I don't think I've ever seen an athlete on a tennis court like Ben Shelton. I mean,
yeah.
I think he's the best athlete. I think he's the best in the men's game. I think he's the best pure athlete I've ever seen on a tennis court. I mean, maybe Rafa, because he was a great soccer player as well, but I still think, there are certain shots that Shelton makes and he jumps like he could dunk a basketball. He looks
most
like
definitely could dunk a basketball.
Yeah,
I bet he could.
Right. And sometimes he hits these shots that look like an NFL wide receiver, making one of those diving catches on the side, as he's going out of bounds. I mean, and twisting it, he twists his body, like fill in the blank, great NFL wide receiver of the moment. And so the question is, and I think this is the thing that all of us have wondered for so long, is, what if Michael Jordan had had a tennis racket when he was 6 years old? What if Steph Curry had had a tennis racket? What if Patrick Mahomes had had a tennis racket and started playing tennis? But, this is America, and like, tennis is not the most popular sport. It doesn't draw the best athletes. I think it drew like a future NFL quarterback when it got Ben Shelton. So did it get him too late, though, is the only question, because he really wasn't playing that much until he was 13, 14 years old. And, the junior rankings will show you that. And he'll be the first one to tell you, like, I don't think I was above 300 as a junior. He's like, I just wanted to play at Florida. He's like, that's all I was focused on. And then it sort of came together very quickly. But it still needs some coming together. I don't know, Alvin, I see you grinning at that. What are you thinking?
Ben Shelton is he comes up a lot in this podcast. So my co-host, Tori Hawkins, knows Brian well from their days together in Atlanta here when Brian was at Georgia Tech. Chris Eubanks came on a couple weeks back, and we talked a lot about Ben. And I also spent some time with him at practice last week. And, seeing him get into an explosive position to hit a serve, it is, especially when you're at court level with him, it's like, that is not what you normally see in tennis. That is a different kind of athlete all the way around. But I think if he focused on tennis earlier, I don't think you get a lot of him the way he is now. And I think that it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. A lot of the lightness with which he can carry himself on a tennis court, or that he brings to legit top 10 professional tennis, I think comes from not having the baggage of having gone through junior tennis. But the flip side is that you'll never see him develop the hand skills and the court savvy and the craft to probably get past. I think you said he's probably bumping into his ceiling, and I agree. Like, it's going to take something else that I don't think he can necessarily create. But look at what he's done without it. That's kind of the takeaway. Like, he's been as high as, I think, 5 in the world without it. So if something were to break in his favor, he would need to break to do himself a favor. But if something were to break in his favor in a draw, he's one of those guys that I think is right there who could potentially catch the Zverev slam every once in a while, if you will. Yeah, that's my Shelton.
I 100% agree with you on that. It did break in his it broke as much in his favor in Paris as it possibly could. If you look at where he was sitting on that side of the draw, like, he was the top player in his section. He had Rafael in the third round, the number 64. And look, I mean, Collignon played lights out tennis that night. Like, he probably would. I mean, he played top 10 tennis that night. So, hats off to him. Yeah. He was great. At the same time, that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity that he missed. At the same time, a night later, I can't remember which. 2 nights later, Francis had the same opportunity. He's playing. What was Arnaldi? 114 or 140 at that point? I mean, 104. He was outside the top 100, and there was a huge opportunity, and waiting for Arnaldi, waiting in the next round was Berrettini. Was an injured Berrettini, and waiting in the next round after that was Caboli. These are
they had opportunities.
Yeah, it was there. So we're always saying, well, if it breaks for them, it broke pretty well for Francis a couple of years ago too. He had a semifinal against Taylor Fritz to make the U.S. Open final. So it's gotten there for them. But I think what also has to happen though is it also has to happen a few more times. They have to get they have to get used to that feeling of being the favorite and being, there's a reason Zverev, it happens for Zverev now, and it didn't happen for him in 2020, or at other times when he's gotten to finals and really hasn't shown up all that great. So, because he'd been there before and he was a little more ready for it, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that Ben is too close to his ceiling because, that would kind I mean, he's still so young, right? He's still so young and he still has so many more balls to hit, but he is learning all this stuff in real time. And, I do want to see him also, in addition to the return, is like hit fewer of like sellout forehands on the run. He never, it's like 1 out of 20 that actually makes it. And when they make it, it's incredible. And he poses for the crowd and his smile lights up and everybody goes crazy. And it's awesome. But he's got to find a way to scramble out of points and steal points the way Sinner and Alcaraz steal points. And they don't necessarily do it with those sort of miracle sellout shots.
Yeah, and it's the steal shot's an interesting one, like that skinny cross when he's running forehand. Like he kind of has to, if it's not a smoker down the line, it's got to be hit quite well because he's usually going into a righties, right into their pocket, or the old, the Rafa, the buggy whip, get that thing high, cross court, deep, reset, and that's the stuff that a lot of tennis players learned that at a time when Ben was under Sinner. I've seen him, a handful of times in person now, like as far back, I think maybe 2021, 2022 Miami Open when he lost to Musetti, or he played Musetti. I don't remember who won the match. I happened to be in Australia for his match against Tommy Paul, I think in 2023 Australian Open. I was in the building. It was fantastic. And then I've seen him a few times since then. It's like you can see the progression happening, and yet you still wonder, like, is it going to be enough at the end of the day? And so I mean, we're probably saying a lot of the same things. I'm giving credit to the work that he's put in and the incremental progress he's made as a tennis player, but unfortunately, the two other guys in his cohort have risen that bar. The bar is quite high at this point. It's extremely high. Last thing before you get out of here, we've had a lot of your time. We are both Pat and I are, Hodar believers, if you will. And, one of my many things to do while I was in DC, pretty high on my list when I saw that I'd be there for Hodar versus, who did he play in the second round? He played Artur Fils. I made a point of watching that entire match.
That was first round.
It was first round. That's our second day,
crazy.
First round.
It should have been a final.
I was telling people next to him, like, we're all here in this insanely hot weather, and it's packed on this side court, effectively, because we all know that this is something very rare and special. And I felt like getting to see him. I watched him practice before that, and then went to the match, and I watched another match of his later on, like getting a feel for his game, like. He is as special as I thought he was, watching him on television, seeing him in person. Do you feel that the tennis public is starting to come around to him? Because I know some reports have been of he's a little short with media at times or short with fans at times.
I mean, I think they will come around. I think look,
20 or something like that. Like,
yeah, but and what are we? We're in August, and 8 months ago, this guy was a freshman at the University of Virginia,
which is wild.
Okay, and by the way, he had I think he had like a 3.5 GPA there. He didn't expect to leave after 5 months. He was like in it for a year, maybe 2 years, and he just got and was working, got really good really quickly, and then did well in the next gen finals, and then it just became like, yeah, this is too good an opportunity to pass up. So he's really raw, both I think he's somewhat raw. He's a lot less raw than a lot of people tennis wise, but he's a little raw in terms of like public persona. We were talking about how challenging it is. I mean, you're suddenly in this. I'm pretty glad I wasn't in the spotlight at 19 years old this. I'm pretty glad I didn't have microphones in front of me. That I wasn't on camera. That people weren't like catching me when I was like, smacking my racket against a fence at times. Like, yeah, these people are really young. They got a lot on them. One of my main goals in this book was to come at it with a tremendous amount of empathy, because being a tennis player, doing one thing from the time you're 8 years old, for the most part, Ben Shelton aside, and a couple others aside, is a lot of pressure. So, and it's a weird childhood. They don't grow up, quote unquote, normally. So, I think you got to give a certain amount of grace.
Sure.
You got to give a certain amount of grace. I've been with Hodar a fair amount among the media these days, like in the last few months. I was with him in Madrid, Paris, London, now in DC. He's fine. Okay. Like he's fine. Is he unbelievably like charming in his second language? That's kind of a lot to ask, I think, for a 19-year-old. He's like perfectly fine. He's kind of straight-laced and kind of rigid. Not everybody is Carlos Alcaraz and, walks into the Wimbledon press room wearing a bucket hat and, waddles in like it's oh, he's got the world in his palm. That's not who Hodar is. Maybe he will be eventually, but it's not who he is right now. As for the tennis, I mean, like I saw him for the first time in person in Madrid. I think the Fonseca match, the Hodar Fonseca spectacle, was my introduction to Rafael Hodar. What an introduction it was. And then saw him in Paris and then on the grass. I will say, I mean, I had a rather high opinion of him. The other night was my first time seeing him on a hard court. And my reaction was, oh shit, this is like that serve on a hard court flies. I mean, that serve is going to handcuff people forever. He can move on a hard court in a way that like when he's not slipping, I mean, he gets in and out of corners like Sinner does at times. Incredible court coverage. His ball strike is just so solid. The ball just flies off his racket. So, yeah, I mean, if he's a stock, I am absolutely buying right now. I can tell you that much.
Would you say the other players are also bringing up Hodar? Like, if you hear them on the side, are they worried about him in a way?
I mean, after the Feast match, I was sitting with Feast for a little while, and I was like, that's kind of a tough draw. And he looked at me like, and he was just like, that is a very tough draw. And he's just like shaking his head. Yeah, I mean, they know how good he is. He's not sneaking up on anybody at this point. So yeah, I think he's, I mean, who knows? And that's just an example of we were talking earlier about the challenge of the book and choosing players. I mean, the sport moves so quickly. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know Rafael Hodar's name until the next gen finals. So I had no idea who he was. And all of a sudden he's, I don't know. I think he was like the third favorite to win the French Open or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think he's a threat to win any tournament, any draw he's in at this point.
I agree, and I'm glad you gave the human perspective on him, and I brought that up not because it matters to me. I'm very, if anyone has listened to this podcast before, they know that I could care less about a player's personality. I'm here to talk about their production as a tennis player, and it is put into perspective that he is 19. He is in his second language. A year ago, none of us knew who he was unless you were an ACC tennis fan, right? Well, Virginia's still in the ACC, right?
It is.
Okay, just
so.
checking.
Yeah.
You never know these days. But he and like Iva Jovic, like they were not with us last year. They are with us now, and tennis does move quite quickly. But what I saw in DC, we've been banging the drum on Hodar for the last 4 months here. What I saw was like a stock M4, like just that has plenty of room for upgrades, and even the stock M4 is a problem by itself. He's with someone that size, he moves so well. His footwork is impeccable, and I think you mentioned his serve. I think his first serve is actually an area of improvement that he can add pop to that first serve. He will be able to get himself out of service games a lot easier in the next 18, 24 months, and I just see the future in front of him, and I go, look, everyone just buckle up. He is with us. He is here. He is one of those ones that will be pushing our sport forward in the next few years. But I think we can probably put a pin in it there. Matt, I appreciate you coming on. Again, The Cruelest Game, August 4th, real soon. Everyone go out, pre-order it, buy it. It's a great read. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I want to know if the book cover that Matt chose if that's his racket that's broken.
That is it. It's not actually my racket, but it could be my racket.
And I speed.
And I will say one thing that was kind of important to me is, if you see on the cover, there is a broken racket floating, but the shadow of it is not a broken racket. It's sort of like a perfect silhouette of a racket. So I thought that sort of showed the two sides of the sport, the euphoria of the sport, the agony and the ecstasy of it. It's subtle, but I'm real happy with it. I'm happy with the way it came out. My wife said, "Why isn't it green?" And I said, like, hard courts aren't green anymore. And this is, so, and she goes to the U.S. Open every year, so she knows. But that was, I thought I do like the blue. I think it came out well. So
yeah,
thanks, and I appreciate your support of it.
And so did the book. Before we came on, I mentioned like it feels like our version, the tennis version of Bill Simmons' book of basketball, just in a much more consumable format. I think you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for writing it, and also thank you for joining us on the Best Three podcast. So we'll put a pin in it there. Matt, Pat, thank you very much. We are